Okay, Miss Linda Perlot, it's really my great pleasure to host you today with my podcast regarding the organizational change. As one of the change leaders I have worked with, I have interacted with during my 18 years of experience in my career. And before we get to the topic, I would love to make a quick introduction about yourself to my audience. So Linda, as one of the key change maker here in our region, in fact, Linda Berlot is a strategic leadership coach and culture transformer, more than 20 years of experience in learning, development, and organizational change. As the CEO of Berlot Group, a premier team coaching firm in the Middle East, Linda partners with C-level leaders to drive alignment, enhance team dynamics, and accelerate performance, which is the core topic of our podcast today. And I would love also to give further, I would say, brief about your expertise, as Linda's expertise spans executive coaching, team coaching, leadership development, and large-scale culture change with a strong track record of impact across diverse industries, including hospitality, retail, finance, and technology. As a certified intercultural intelligence and agility facilitator, she excels in navigating complex multicultural environments to enable strategic transformation. Linda, my personal experience with you, it started when one of the companies that I worked for, in fact, assigned you to create a positive change in the culture of the organization, in the discipline, on the attitude, on multiple, in fact, directions, where we got to know Linda on several workshops, several interactions, and I would say my personal and many of my colleagues' personal experience that it was the least slides presented, but with the most ever knowledge gained, most ever, I would say, change left. So that was a change itself, in fact, in the method also of delivering such kind of coaching training. So to get started, Linda, what is change?
First of all, Ali, thank you so much for inviting me here to your podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed working with you in those workshops, in those team coaching workshops. And so I'm delighted that you've invited me to speak about such an important topic, change management, right? And it's a topic that I am passionate about. So, well, change is very simply, change is a process that moves us from one state, usually the state we know, to a second state, usually something different. And we either find change and invite it in, or change finds us and then, takes us there.
Yeah. Perfect. Linda, usually when we talk about change, experts usually link it to kind of risk or fear, or even the people themselves who are being under change process. Usually their nature, takes them to maybe as an initial stage to thinking about the risk, the fear, the resistance, these kind of things. Why it happens like that?
Yeah. Well, because we are human and change is an emotional journey. We don't really, as humans, we like that which is comfortable and safe, right? So change very often makes us feel unsafe. Depending on our personality, the impact of the change, how we perceive the change, we will either resist or move quickly through that change curve, right? And most personalities fear losing something, loss of health, loss of friends, loss of power, loss of data, loss of something, which is why we resist change. And change is really an emotional journey, I think.
Yeah. So can we say it is the fear from the unknown? Because people are going to, as you mentioned at the beginning, from, let's say, like from position A to position B. So most of the people are unaware what is waiting for them in position B, so that can create this kind of I would say like a risk feeling or fear or something like that.
Sometimes it's the fear of unknown. So I don't move countries because I don't know what's on the other side. But sometimes it's fear of a perceived something I make up in my mind. For example, if I am diagnosed with cancer, I am afraid of dying, even though nothing indicates that death is an outcome. Or
Yeah, yeah,
if
yeah.
we have an organizational restructure, do you know, I fear losing my power, my control. So sometimes
Mm,
it's
mm.
that it's the fear of the unknown, and sometimes it's the story we make up, the projection of what we believe lies over there.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's nice. And Linda, if we will talk in a wider space, okay, change can happen in personal life, can happen in your life, can happen in organizations.
Right,
And here, where usually I would say, like sometimes, let me say it this way, like a huge investment is being made to create change in
right,
organizations.
right.
If I would ask, why do organizations change? Why do they need to change? What is the need behind that? Why?
Well, not just organizations, but us as humans. If we don't change, grow, and evolve, we get left behind and we become obsolete. Someone is always smarter, faster, younger, more energetic than us, and they are and hungry to succeed. And so, if we want to stay relevant, it's important that we deliver, that we develop a survival skill, which is learn, unlearn, and learn again, and keep doing that several times. Whether it's an organization or a human. Mm.
There is a common say, I heard it many times in the market, like change or die. Or sometimes they say innovate or stagnate.
Yeah.
Up to what extent do you agree or disagree with this say?
Well, I think that's true, right? I don't know that it's immediate death, but over a period of time, I mean, we just have to look at some of the brands that are no longer relevant. Some of the camera, the old-fashioned cameras that we used to have and are no longer relevant, or some of the phones that led the market with their phones and now are no longer relevant anymore. And that's because they didn't evolve fast enough.
Mm, mm, mm. So from your perspective, change is a must. It is not like something it should be optional or something like luxury. Change is a must, regardless of the status that we are in right now, right? We should always think of the positive change in career and life and all these kind of things, isn't it?
I think only two things are guaranteed in life: death and change.
Yeah, another common say, which is always usually hear about this, and we use it like change is the main constant, and some people say the only
Absolutely.
constant in life. So change is a
Absolutely.
constant thing in
Yeah,
life,
absolutely.
although the terminology itself sometimes like looks like contrasting, but this is a fact that change is a constant, and this
Absolutely.
has happened, for nations, for organizations, for people, for everything in life. That change
Absolutely.
was the constant across the history, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. Nice. Okay, Linda, if I would love just to ask another question, in fact, with respect to the need for change. When do need for change appears? Uh, so the need for change, some organizations, there are some divisions like responsible for the strategic planning or even like sales management, marketing, business development. And when they have their meeting or board meeting, they feel like there is a need for change. When does this need of change appears from your point of view?
I mean, change is constant. So the market changes. There are external things that force us to change, like the market, politics, the economy, global shifts, global trends,
Yeah.
the trends that people choose. I mean, if you just look at this Labubu craze at the moment, I mean, it's a collectible doll, and people are going insane and spending insane amounts of money. And People not, and everybody now is jumping on the bandwagon. Or in Dubai recently, we had the Dubai chocolate craze, right? And now every company has Dubai chocolate flavor,
Yeah.
tiramisu and ice cream and everything. So markets and so there's external reasons to change, but there are also internal reasons to change. There are things like our processes and our systems don't
Mm.
allow us to keep up with maybe our internal growth. Maybe we've grown and we need to change. Maybe we need to change building because we have so many more people. And what you start to realize is that there is transactional change, which are the changes that I need to make on a day-to-day basis to stay relevant. For example, if I sell a phone, I need to continuously update my phones. Yeah, this is transactional change. It doesn't require much emotional shifting by people who live in the organization. But then there is transformational change. Transformational changes are big enterprise-wide changes like reorganizational structures, restructuring, ERP solutions being implemented. These impact people a lot. And the companies that fail to manage the people aspect of change, that don't realize that change is actually an emotional journey and only focus on the
Mhm.
task side of change, these are the ones where change fails, right? Because they don't take the people with them.
Yeah. I will go to this specific point, but before that, there is also one of the things that in industry we face, organizations face, which is called strategic drift, and this happens when organizations fail to recognize or respond or even adapt to changes within its business environment. And we have seen the past 20 years in our generation
Right.
also that lots of huge companies, firms, and if I will make it straightforward, in mobile industry, they were amazing giants, and suddenly they vanished.
Right.
So this strategic drift, it happened, in fact, and there is nothing would prevent it to happen again. And I would love to link this also to one word was said by Jack Welch, who's who in the business strategies change environment. And I will read it as it is. He says, if the rate of change on the outside exceeds the rate of change on inside, the end is near. Uh, do you agree or disagree with him in the specific point? And I need Linda's also elaborated perspective in this because, again, you are one of the key people that we have touched. I would say the change that you have created in organizations. Yeah.
I think it's
So
absolutely
back
true.
to Welsh word. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
absolutely true. It means that if we're not changing at the rate of external change, well, we're going to become obsolete. If we're not familiar with the trends and everything that's happening around us, we will just get left behind because other people are eager and growing and will just take up that market share, as you mentioned in the mobile industry, for example. Um, I think we need to be comfortable enough to be change agile. So learn, unlearn, and keep relearning as an organization and be ready to take risks and move away perhaps from what we started and what was important to us in those previous moments. I reflect on when COVID happened. Do you remember when COVID happened? There were all these restaurants. So people used to go out to eat. Then COVID happened and, quarantine. So if restaurants stayed in the way, operated in the way that they knew, for example, people have to come into my establishment for me to feed them, those are the restaurants that became obsolete and suffered. But the restaurants that quickly recognized the trend and all of a sudden did a home delivery service, they are the businesses that kept up with the change and the market
Yeah.
needs. Mm.
They won, yeah, they won.
Yeah.
And in this regard, maybe I can also elaborate from our industry perspective that that on one hand, the organization leaders, in fact,
Yeah.
they either should perceive or at least if their team is strong enough, capable enough to scan the external environment, they can reflect on the weak signals. So they can come and say, okay, our bosses, our management, this XYZ is happening in the market. Our competitors are growing in this way, bringing this kind of, as you mentioned at the beginning, also transformational product, something, it meets certain kind of trends. So these signals it is a must to be analyzed by the top management, in fact, to cope with the changes happening in the market. So in that way, they either innovate or for sure they will stagnate or will suddenly be out of the market, as we have seen also in our read on also.
Right. Right.
Linda, one so interesting study, in fact, it was conducted by McKinsey. McKinsey says like 33% of change efforts succeed, which in other words, I would say like almost 67 to 70% of change strategies or plans fail. This is a big number, but why it happens, in fact?
Because organizations underestimate the impact of the change on the human people who are implementing the change, and they don't spend time, money, and effort on change management practices. And change management practices are not focusing on the task, they are focusing on the people aspect of change. And so they underestimate how people respond to change. In a very bottom line way, change and transformational change is an emotional journey. If I am a human and being asked to behave in a different way, to go to work in a different route, to sit in a different office, and it impacts me, I am going to have an emotion about that. And the organization that fail or underestimate the impact of that emotion on the worker and don't put change management practices in place are the organizations where change fails.
So I would say a key word here is the proper implementation of the change process.
Change management practices.
Change management practices.
What companies do well is they map the change. Maybe there is an as is and a to be, and then they map the change. And they say, you know what? This change is going to be fantastic for everybody. However, they fail to really, along the change process and that roadmap, they fail to implement change management activities along that roadmap. Change management activities include training people up, over communicating the change, helping people see how the change is not just good for the organization, but also good for each one of us, and keep pointing them towards the future, giving people an opportunity to vent and share their fears, share their anger, and keep pointing them towards, the future. So unless we are consciously and intentionally implementing those change management activities and therefore taking our people with us, very often change fails.
I believe there should be something in your mind regarding some organizations who really were very successful implementing the change process, apply the successful practices. And also there might be some organizations who really did not take it seriously, who did not practice it in a proper way. If you don't mind, would you give me like one example in your mind of organizations that really adopted the change plans, the change strategies, you practiced that in reality, and then they perceived, they pick the fruits out of that.
Yeah.
Something in your mind?
I absolutely do. I've had the very privilege of working with teams that successfully implemented change, and also learning a lot from teams that didn't manage the change management aspect very well, and therefore the change failed. So a successful team I worked with was we had an external consultant, and they were teaching us change management practices. And we were very, very clear about where we wanted to go, what the roadmap was. but the CEO was very, very smart and he invested in recruiting a change management team. And the role of the change management team was to prepare the organization to implement the change. And we spent, we ran campaigns to name this change team. We had rewards for people who came up with the logo for the change team. We found small and big ways to create excitement, enthusiasm, and involve everybody. We started to announce the changes right from the CEO's announcement to smaller announcements. We had excitement campaigns. We started to create small, quick wins, which people would start to then perceive the change positively. And we kept informing about the successes we were experiencing. At the same time, we were bringing back messages from the organization of the fears they had, the concerns they had, the challenges that they were facing, and the change team kind of crafted messages and went back to answer all of those messages. So there was a constant flow of communication between the change teams and the implementation teams and the rest of the organization. And so together, they moved through the change, mainly because the change team recognized that change was an emotional process. So they put lots of activities in place to help people understand change, educate them around change, and implement the change and manage themselves through that change. But they also, from an enterprise-wide, implemented change management policies and practices so that the organization could start to implement change in a well-planned, structured way. And therefore, change was no longer a, a scary event for the population in the organization. And so they succeeded. They went from change to change to change, strength to strength to strength.
Amazing, amazing, Linda. And this also takes me to when we want to create some strategic change in business, because in the organizations where we work on, in fact, we focus also on target achievements, setting KPIs to the team and following up on that. So I perceive that you have scanned the needs for this team that you have worked on. Then you have I would say formulated a strategy, change strategy. Then you implemented the change strategy, and you set some KPIs also to let them know that yes, they are positively changing. There are short wins, short runs wins, which also can be reflected on themselves that yes, we are changing to the right direction. We are doing it. It is not something, it is not the mission impossible. It is much mission possible, and we are doing it. And I think when people perceive these kind of things, it will be another motivator for them to go to next steps and do more successes also in that regard. In this specific point, Linda, let me ask you about the champion of the change, or let me call it also can be the master of the change agent. From Linda's perspective, internal or external? This is a critical question, and usually this question pops up. This question pops up in organization like, should it be internal agent or external agent? What do you think? What is your experience on this? How do you feel about it?
I think both are necessary. However, it's important to understand the different roles in the change. So you've got the change sponsor, usually the CEO, and they are the one that's saying the change must go, right? So but they're not involved in the change. Then you've got, you might have the change champions in the organization. These might be the department heads, also too busy to do anything, but they are there to make sure that their teams are on track and on board and all the rest of it. And then you've got the change agent team, and they might be external in the form of consultants and internal, right? In my opinion, both are needed. However, when you're recruiting for a consultant, what you want is not a group of consultants that come in, implement the change for you, and then when they leave, you don't have the skills to manage that change yourself, and the change fails within 2 years, which is, by the way, most of the external change agents. What you want is a change agent, an external consultant that teaches you the skills, practices, and tools and processes so that you can then manage the change yourself when they've gone away. That is the best combination. The role of the change agent internally is vital. So, who are these change agents? Usually, they are not the formal leaders. They are the informal leaders. They are people. They are well respected, well liked, and they sit inside the departments often. They're not the change implementers. These are task focused people. Task focused people are looking at the implementation of the change.
Yeah.
They're not people. So we can't mix them, right? You want people to belong to the change team, to be enthusiastic about the change, to go back to the departments, to talk about the change, to sit with the people, but also to listen to what are the fears, what are the concerns about the people, bring them back to the change implementation team, get the answers, get the solutions, and then go back. So it's a backwards and forwards. They are the link, the bridge between the change itself and the people aspect.
So, Linda, this is also another very critical point when it comes to the organizations, because in I would say most of the organizations, the leaders of the organizations, let's say like could be general managers, CEOs, or sometimes MDs, division managers, they think that they should be the one who will drive the change or will take it to the next level. But the interesting point here, which I learned from you also now, like it would be more fruitful if it would be like role models of the employees themselves, some people or someone who is really known for integrity, for energy. People are accepting, from to take from him or her in that regard, who's really leading by example, who walks the talks, and people trust that, yes, this person, I trust what he says, and I will take it over. I will walk with him. I will go into that journey with him. So this is
Well,
also another very interesting point. Yeah,
and it's not either or. It's not either or. The change
should be both.
sponsor, yes,
Yeah,
all of them need to be role models. All of them need to be resolute that we are
exactly,
changing
exactly.
and to display enthusiasm. But the sponsor, their role is to make the organization-wide announcements, to sign the policies, to sign the
Yeah,
procedures.
yeah,
The
yeah,
change, oh God, I've lost the term now. The change champions could be the department heads. They are important too. Then you've got the implementers and the implementing team, and then the informal change agents, which are all of those roles are super important.
yeah. Very nice. Linda, when it comes to the change process implementation part, what is the hardest part of change? Is it the strategy? Is it the people? Is it the culture? What do you think?
Undoubtedly, people and culture.
People and culture.
Undoubtedly. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
culture, let's talk a little bit about that.
Yes.
Culture,
What is culture? What
yeah.
is culture?
Culture in an organization is the way we do things, the written and unwritten rules about how we do things, how we get stuff done, and how we treat each other, right? So it's
Yeah,
behavior.
yeah,
It's really behavior. If the policies are too clunky, do we go around and tap into people we know? Do we leverage
yeah,
relationships? If there are
yeah,
very high politics, do I either play the politics or not? So all of that forms part of our culture. So
yeah.
asking people to change their behavior is really difficult, especially if they don't understand why. And especially if the way I'm behaving now serves me, then it's going to be that much harder for me to change. Usually it takes
Mm.
18 months to 2 years of concerted effort to change a culture in an organization. Have you ever heard the expression, they say that culture eats strategy for breakfast? Have you heard that expression?
Yeah. I think I heard it from you one time. Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
you can have the best strategy, but if you haven't taken your people with you, if you've not convinced them, the strategy will sit in your bottom drawer, you know.
Yes, and there is a common say also in this regard, like ignoring the health of your culture is like letting aquarium water get dirty. Or also when it comes to the health status of the culture, and this is also perceived concept. When you mentioned that the written and unwritten rules, like behavioral or something, Edgar Shine says like 90% of the behavior in organizations is driven by cultural rules. Imagine 90%. So cultural rules, if we talk about the unwritten things, if we talk about agreed values, agreed, let's say like things that I'm going. So it's all about culture. From your perspective,
And
can Linda? Yeah, please, Linda. Yeah,
and
yeah.
culture is going to get created whether you are intentional about it or not.
So it will be created.
It will
It will be
just,
created.
with the moment you bring people together, we're going to figure
Yeah.
out how we're going to work, how do we get stuff done, how do we treat each other, and your culture starts to be created.
And the measure is to be healthy, or unfortunately, in certain occasions, can be toxic. We hear this a lot that this is healthy, this is a strong culture organization, or it is toxic culture organization. Linda, can culture be changed? If yes, how? This is also very difficult topic.
It's a long process, yes, and a big topic. Yes, the culture can be changed but usually it's a long process, 18 months, 2 years of really concerted effort. And it starts with your values. It starts with defining that handful of rules that you hire and fire against. But for
Mm,
most organizations, values are just that thing that sits on our website, and then nobody knows how to live the values. So if you had to dial it back, creating or understanding what is your reason for being, what is that handful of rules that are non-negotiables for you, and then you hire people against that. So you make sure that those are woven in the adverts that you promote on LinkedIn, that when you're going through your recruitment process, you're looking for those qualities and those values. Then you've got behavior statements so that from the CEO to the driver to everybody in between, they know how to behave the values. And then you've got your performance managements, rewards and recognition. You've got your KPIs, all that drive the behavior. And also you've got your consequences. Like
mm,
what consequences for not living the values, do you know? So not only
yeah,
do we want to be rewarded, and then also we want to create fun things to kind of keep the values front of mind. So, for example, newsletters or announcements or values shout outs or, the values winners of the month or the year. And, these are fun activities that constantly keep the values front of mind. Once you are doing that, you're then looking at, okay, so now we've got the behavior right. We need to look
yeah,
at the
yeah.
organization, the
Mm.
processes, the policies, the structures. Do they support us being able to live the values, right?
Yeah, yeah. Linda, you've been in UAE, I believe, for more than 20 years now. And specifically, if we talk about United Arab Emirates, there are lots of regional offices for
Yeah,
multinational companies. These multinational companies
that's right.
might be headquartered in Switzerland, in UK, in
Right.
Italy, in the United States, France, Canada, wherever. It can happen that, yes, these headquarters of these multinational companies are very renowned in the market with a very strong culture. They are very super excited, happy about it. They have some KPIs measures. How can these multinational companies, the headquarters, ensure that their subsidiaries, their regional offices overseas, can be in UAE, in Saudi, in India, or even in the Asia Pacific, wherever, how these headquarters can ensure that their culture is implemented, is followed in the overseas offices?
This is my favorite topic. I work with leadership teams across the region, and all of the teams I work with are multicultural. And I get very often called in to mop up when an
Yeah,
organization has tried to implement something that was appropriate at their head office and they've tried to implement it here in the region or in the Far East or somewhere else. I think it's it is common to want to spread your company culture through the world. However, in a monocultural society or a monocultural organizational culture where there are commonly understood norms, you can do that. When you want to translate your culture into multicultural environments or environments that see the world, they've got different world views and see the world differently to you, you have to think global, And then, so go global, think local. You have to trust the local teams to
Yeah.
translate it in a culturally appropriate way that makes sense for that national culture, but also for the culture, your organizational culture in that national context. It's very important.
Amazing. And can it be measured? Even if they follow these instructions, or let's say you as a culture change coach, you might be applying, implementing, and then the headquarters, can they measure the local offices, overseas subsidiaries? Let me say it, how can they measure, in fact, if their culture is implemented properly, is taken by heart, and since it is unwritten things, it's like a practice, it is more discipline, right? How can they measure that it is happening overseas?
Well, I mean, we've got cultural surveys. There are many cultural surveys, employee engagement surveys, leadership surveys. All of these can be implemented in the organizations, right? And
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you can craft what you're looking for in these surveys. I
yeah,
think what's important is for global organizations to understand that um, whilst the essence of their culture must remain, they must
mm,
be comfortable in allowing the local organizations to 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 deliver the essence of the culture in a flavor that suits that multicultural environment. So it's not
nice.
copy and paste. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more into to see it implemented, to be perceived also. And for sure, as you mentioned, there are several ways from the report, from the surveys, from also the
Right.
perception of the people when they reflect on their environment. The rate of people turnover also can be a measure, right? Also, if something is happening or not
Well,
sometimes. And so,
absolutely. But also in a multicultural environment, there are no commonly understood norms. Let's
mm,
take trust or respect, right? In
yeah,
some
yeah,
cultures, I give you trust until you break it. In other cultures, no. You have to
you
earn
have to
my
prove,
trust. Right.
you have to,
But
yeah,
now, and in these are commonly understood norms. Everybody in this part of the world knows that this is how we do trust. But when you come to a multicultural environment or the head office is from another culture, you have to talk about that. You have to design cultures where it's no longer about my culture and your culture. We create third cultural spaces that have
yeah.
the essence of the head office, but that resonate for the workforce in that local land.
Absolutely. So the resonation of the culture in the local offices or
I'll give
overseas
you
offices.
I'll give you an
Yeah,
example, Ali. I know you want to move
please,
on, but I'll
please.
give you an example.
Yeah, please, please,
Um,
please.
take the topic of racism, right?
Yeah,
A few
yeah,
years ago in America, this was very important. Racism is an important topic all around the world, right?
yeah,
However, and I really don't want to undermine those efforts. But in a land where I have war on my back, in my back garden, or famine, or we have internal civil war, right? When you try and impose a culture of racism in my land, it won't resonate because there are other things happening in my land which are much more important. So, an example of go global and think local is to get the issue behind the issue. So
mm,
if
mm.
racism is the issue, what's the bigger issue? Maybe the bigger issue is one group of people imposing the will on another group of people. Now, when I allow the teams to frame it that way, all of a sudden this is relevant to all of us, whether we've got famine or whether we've got civil war or whether we've got, whatever's happening on in my land. Now the topic is relevant, but I don't call it racism because that resonates in one land but not in another. So it's finding ways that the culture, your head office culture, can resonate and is appropriately named in the land that the territories themselves.
Yes, and in this regard, you also always focus, Linda, on considering the local aspects of culture because for sure you've been in Arabia region and I respect that you have noticed this, you have applied this also in your coaches, the companies where I
Absolutely.
worked in, that in Arabia region there are some cultural aspects. It's not common, not the same like it is Europe or the States. Something can be in India, in the Asian countries which is not in other countries. And it is instrumental also
Absolutely.
of the coach, leader, the agent, also to understand these kind of aspects when it comes
Absolutely.
to the local cultural aspect, right? So
Absolutely.
this is part of the story. Last, I know we are approaching to the end. Last question, organizational change models. We have studied these in theories in the organizational change textbooks. In fact, one of them is McKinsey, another one, 7S framework, Kotter's 8 step, and another interesting one, which is ADKAR model. Some people call it like ADKAR model. What is Linda's favorite model out of this? If there is a specific one, or it is being customized, depends on
Yeah.
the training or coaching you are running. So I would love just to end with your personal, in fact, approach that is being followed. Yeah, in this regard.
I mean, there's value in all of these models. 100 years ago, I was trained in the ADKAR model. I am besotted. I absolutely love John Cotter and all his work. I particularly love John Cotter. The one book that really for me was very powerful was The Heart of Change, because he talked about leading the emotions of change. And this for me was very important. At the moment, I'm exploring a book called and a model, change model called Switch, and it is called How to Change When Change is Hard by Chip and Dan Heath. And what I love about this is that he finds ways to engage both rational and emotional mindsets. And then he looks at how do you create short-term wins to bring everybody on board with you, you know. So I'm constantly finding new reading, new models, new thinking, because again, if you don't change, it's adapt or die. And I
Yes.
do amalgamate, I bring in all of the learnings that I have into my change processes.
That's brilliant, Linda. I would love that if we can have another 1 or 2 hours. This is something really, really interesting, amazing, lots of perfect insights. In my language, I would say to you, shukran. In your language, grazie. Thank you very
Prego.
much, Linda. Really, thank you so much for being with me in this podcast. I'm looking forward also to share it with my audience, and I absolutely trust that they will find lots of amazing instructions, information, also shared experience that can help them change either in on personal level or even on the organizational level. Thank you so much, Linda,
Thank
and
you,
I wish you have a
Ali.
great day. Thanks so much. My
Thank you
pleasure.
so
Thank you so
much
much.
for inviting me to speak about such an important topic, and it's been delightful spending this time with you.
Very kind of you, Linda, always. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Take care. Thanks, sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks. Bye.